Hi, this is Kenny Donaldson, Associate Director of Strategic Programming Initiatives and the Executive Manager of the Heinz Fellows Program at the University of Pittsburgh Center for Urban Education. Today, we're going to be talking about the Heinz Fellows Program. I have two of our fellows here. We've received many questions about the Heinz Fellows Program. Overall, just a general outline of the program. It's a year-long fellowship where you're supporting students and teachers in K through 12 Pittsburgh public school settings. So I thought that in order for people to get a better idea of what the program is about, who better to speak about it than two of our fellows that are currently working in the building. So I would like the fellows to introduce themselves individually, and then we'll get into the questions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brana Hill. I am from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I am currently a Heinz Fellow at Pittsburgh University Prep. I serve in the high school.
Hello, my name is Jamaal Gosa. I'm from Linden, New Jersey, and I'm a Heinz Fellow at University Prep High School.
Perfect. So with Jamaal and Brene here, I thought it would be great to talk about their roles in the building, some of the things that they've discovered this year in this fellowship, some of the great times that they had, some of the challenging things that have happened with their role, and overall just to get a description of what the role of a Heinz Fellow is and the experiences that they've had this year. So Brene, let's start with you. Can you tell us about some of the things that you have done in the building and some of the roles that you do as a Heinz Fellow?
So this year has been very interesting and very insightful about what goes on in the Pittsburgh public schools. And so when I first got to UPrep, I worked in the high school, of course, and was just trying to build relationships. And that's a big thing we do as Heinz Fellows, is build relationships with our students. So that was the main goal. And then I was given an opportunity to actually take the students out of the school a few times, so going on field trips. And then also as a college graduate, I co-founded an organization called Queens. And basically our goal is to work directly with women of color to support them in educational spaces. So with Queens, I was able to start and run a program the first semester of school here at UPrep and got to work one-on-one and in group settings with the women of color at UPrep. And so it's been really fun. And it was really great because I got to bring women from outside of the school, from Pittsburgh, who were working women, and get them to interact with my girls and just allow them to see life outside of UPrep and what opportunities they have after they graduate. So.
Great. So I think that the fact that you brought this program into the school, Brene, really speaks to the autonomy and the ability of Heinz Fellows to create a space in the building where they can use their strengths and use some of the things that they brought to the table and some of the assets within the building in order to create a structured program. Jamaal, I know you've worked a lot with the early college high school program. Can you talk to us a little about that?
Yes, the early college high school program is a dual enrollment program, I should say, where students get high school credits and they get college credits as well. If they complete the program completely, they can end high school with 30 college credits. So my role with that, I'm like the academic coach there. So I serve as a coach where I see students' grades. I'm like their advisor. I have one-on-ones. I have weekly check-ins with students and things like that. So lately I've been doing more like coordinating stuff. So I've been coordinating and planning college trips and life skills segments throughout their curriculum. So we do life skill things on like money and what to do after school, more awareness about stuff that's going on in the community, like resume stuff and things like that. And we also go on college tours to prospective colleges and universities in the area. The furthest we went so far was Indiana University of Pennsylvania, which is my alma mater. I was very proud of that, and we plan on continuing that and doing more trips throughout the year and that kind of stuff like that.
Great. So I think when people have questions about what the Heinz Fellows program is, it really depends on what role you're serving in the building, what things you have done before. So, Brana, you mentioned Queens. You brought that into the building. You had done that previously. Jamaal, you mentioned the early college high school program, and you've done a lot of that work previously at your alma mater. So I think it really speaks to the fact that we, as the program, what we try to do is tap into the assets that folks are bringing into the program and create a space for that in the building as well. So, Brana, can you tell us about how many students you worked with in your Queens program? How many young women you supported?
Yes. So any given day, I would have between 5 to 15 girls, and that was per period. So I would do morning sessions, usually after lunch. You know, it's hard to gather everyone. So morning sessions would have about 15 girls per period, and we just sit and talk. Sometimes the conversations would go long, sometimes not, depending on what's gone on over the weekend or what's going on in the school. But oftentimes what it comes down to is creating a sense of family and creating a sense of belonging in schools where our students are not supported. And I don't think it's the fact that students aren't supported, it's that they don't feel that way almost all the time. So it's getting them to understand that they have the ability to make themselves feel welcome and know that they're welcome and find that confidence in themselves. That's what our conversations were mostly about.
Absolutely. And I could speak, I personally attended one of the Queen sessions where they were reading a book by Leon Ford, who is a Pittsburgh native, and just the discussions and the conversations. We often focus on what's talked about in the classroom or the curriculum, and the fact that Brana had this group speaking on a book that may not be featured in the classroom, but the powerful lessons that the young woman took away from it, the conversations that they were having, I think were influential things that carry over into their personal life. So speaking of carrying over into the personal life, Jamaal, when we talk about the early college high school program, you've talked about how students could get units that are or credits that apply to college. What are some of the most memorable things that have occurred working with the college high school program for you? And also, how many students have you supported in this program?
I support about 35 to 40 students. That's in an entire program. So I have a bi-weekly schedule where I meet with some of the sophomores and juniors and freshmen. So that's about the amount that I serve. And what was the question before that?
When we were talking about just the way that this applies to things outside of life. So when we talk about schools, we often talk about curriculum. We talk about things that happen inside the classroom. What impact do you think this program has had on students that isn't necessarily measurable, but things that they've told you about the program?
Oh, they appreciate the ability to feel like they're a college student. I think many students have told me they felt like they're in college when they go to these visits and they sit down and get lectures from professors, and they know that their friends might not get that same experience, and then they're getting exposure to what college is and how different it looks from university prep. And they also get to see how diverse certain areas are as opposed to our school, where we're predominantly black school, and seeing different races and things like that brings more awareness for them and knowing like this is diversity in other spaces.
Great. So I think we've talked at length about how the different programs that the Heinz Fellows bring into the building have had an effect on students. What I want to talk to you, Brana and Jamaal, and Brana, we'll start with you, is how has this program personally and professionally impacted your life?
Yes, this program, I think, has challenged me personally. Just like I said when we first started, like it's a challenging field, and I think for those who aren't in education and are looking at this program as their step in, I think this is a great way to see what education really is about, because you really have young people's lives in your hand. Your yes or your good morning or your whatever you say to them could very well change their life. One day, one action can change someone's life. So this program has allowed me to see that impact that I have, because even today or days when I don't feel like I'm making the most impact, my students remind me like, wow, I missed you over the weekend, or wow, I haven't seen you, or thank you so much for coming to my class when we talked about it. Like things like that can really change how you feel about how you're impacting someone. Also just remind you that like these are their lives in your hands and you have the power to help them and support them to grow into better people.
Perfect. So Jamaal, passing it to you, personally and professionally, how has this program impacted you?
It made me more aware of what schooling is, and I think that I get the opportunity to see what it looks like for students that don't want to go to college and what their focus is and how they need to be supported in schools. Because when you have a student that isn't motivated to go to college, then your approach is different. And I think you have to also be mindful about what these life skills are that they need to learn to work, to be able to work into the workforce and these different trade schools or things like that. So I think learning that all students don't want to go to college, and that was new for me because I have a higher ed background. So seeing that has been opening for me, and I think just the consistency in how students don't like give up and seeing their brilliance in different ways of like how creative they are and just how they're kids and like seeing kids be kids, and I think that's opening for me, and I think that's it.
Yeah. If I could add though, just on the sense of treating students, supporting students the way they need to be supported. This program definitely shows you that like every student doesn't need to be supported the same way, and we go through a lot of training as Heinz Fellows, and bringing that training back to the schools. Although you may have learned something brilliant or think this may work, trying to get it to actually work with a student who may not necessarily want that type of support or want support that way challenges how you support your students. So like every student doesn't want to be supported the same way and needs different help or different attention or doesn't want attention at all. It's just the way that you learn how to be there for your students.
And I think like also like being creative. I think when it comes to curriculum stuff, it's like, how am I going to keep these students engaged with what we're doing? And it can't be traditional boards. You need some restorative pieces. You need more personal stuff. You need to add rap in it and things like that. And I think I see more like how creative you have to be in education now to keep my phone away. You know what I mean? Because now social media and cell phones have disrupted a lot of things, and I think that if you can learn how to use technology in education while being creative, while students feel like they're engaged in the classroom, like it is a family and it is like our space, and also giving students a voice to advocate for their learning. And I think that's one thing that stood out for me. Like if you're not feeling like you are getting this, how do you advocate for your voice to be heard? And that's one thing I think being in the fellowship that I always try to be open for students. Like if you feel like you're not learning, let's go talk to the teacher. Or if you're having difficult with something, like don't be scared to talk to your teacher. I think that concept of students are still looking at teachers as just a teacher. Like you teach me and that's it, and they don't look at the relationship side of it. And I think that's a part that is missing in education.
Right. So when we talk about, traditional tutoring or mentoring programs, typically you think of I work with a group of students, I support them, and they come to me with their needs, and I provide this knowledge. I think one of the unique things about this program is that we have discussion about what equitable education is. You both touched on meeting students where they're at, and I think it's important that we help students develop voice and agency in buildings where they often don't feel that, or they feel like, the educational system in and of itself may be oppressive to their needs. And it's not that teachers are being oppressive, and it's not that the building itself is being oppressive, but it's just the system of education is not reaching certain students and how students feel sometimes when they're in these buildings. So I think we come from a unique perspective of trying not just to support students and give students voice, but helping teachers sometimes navigate, like you both mentioned, of, education is not where it was 10, 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Things have changed. So how can we also work with teachers to have them utilize tools that are more culturally relevant so that students can be engaged in the work? And I think there's teachers that are doing amazing stuff in UPrep that we learn from as well. So this isn't a one-sided relationship where we're imparting knowledge on students or we're imparting knowledge on teachers. I think it works both ways, where we try to support students but also work with teachers to provide a climate, provide an environment where students can learn best. So one of the things I want to ask you is when we talk about all of this support for students, we talk about working with teachers, there has to be one memorable moment that you look at as this was a moment that defined the work that I did this year. So can you both think of maybe one moment this year where you really felt like, wow, this is, I'm really making a difference? And I know that there are a lot of impactful times that you talk to students, a lot of impactful moments you have maybe with teachers or administrators, but can you think of one moment? And it doesn't have to be something that just happened recently. It may be something you reflect on that kind of summarizes like one of the impactful moments in this program for you.
Well, for me, a student I've been working with very closely this year, he told me that he's on honor roll and he wants to be challenged in a different way. And I was like, okay, cool. How? And he was just like, I want to learn more stuff about being socially active and basically kind of how to talk to adults. And I don't know how to do that. And I think one of the many conversations that we have dialogue about things that he watches on television. And we talk about it during the lunchtime and just unpack like what he learned. And now he is able to identify the things that we talk about, like things like race and things like injustices and why this wasn't fair. And we had a conversation about a situation that happened in Pittsburgh that was very impactful to the city. And he gave his point of view. And 6 months ago, he wouldn't have said that. Mm-hmm. But I know that with the conversations that we've been having, that's how he's talking now in a sense, but I know that he's speaking to his friends now about that. So that's more students becoming more aware of like what social injustices are and what their reality is, and knowing how to like advocate for himself. And I think I could talk about something else. So he's inspiring to be a chef, and I told him like you need to learn how to market yourself. And I told him this in like October. I never brought it up again. And today, he showed me his Instagram page with him with his chef gear on and like trying to start showing his dishes and things like that. And that right there was just something for me, like you listen, you know what I mean? And you really took time out your day to really create this page and market for yourself and advocate for yourself because that's what you want to do in culinary. So those are two of the moments I think were the most impactful for me. There are many more, but those two stood out to me for the most because I feel like I assisted with some of the skills that he lacked and he trusted me. And I think that's a big thing. Like a lot of students do trust us and we kind of just worked out where we are now. And yeah.
Great. Brana, can you share one moment with us?
Yeah, yes. So there was this Black History Month, there was actually the Martin Luther King contest, and we were given the opportunity to actually bring the contest into UPrep, which gratefully I was in an English classroom and had a relationship with the teacher, and she ended up making the contest a part of the assignments for that specific grade period. So every student had to write an essay, which in hindsight, like, we're kind of making them do it, but I don't think they would have submitted essays or poems otherwise. And one of our students was recognized for her poetry, and she got to bring her family to the event. And it was just exciting to see her excitement about it, because I think she was surprised that she was even being recognized for that. And I couldn't pick between two moments. So there was another time where I actually got to take the students to Ellis School for the Culture Jam, which is student-ran and student-led. And I took about 16 students to the field trip. And just to see their faces, to see that the students put on that event and inspired them. They not only want to attend next year, but they want to present next year. And I think it inspired them to want to do something at their own school. So again, opening our students' eyes to life outside of what high school or what just UPrep provides for them, and letting them know that they have that agency to do whatever they want to do.
Great. So we've talked about the impact upon students. We've talked about the impact upon you. Let's go a little deeper and let's talk about future steps. So what do you all see as some of the next steps that you've learned from this program, or things that you've taken from this program that you can now use going forth professionally? And I know, Brana, you and I have had conversation about Queens, what you might be able to do with Queens. So let's touch on that real quick.
Yes, so As far as Queens, just being able to bring it into UPrep has opened my mind to the possibilities for different schools. So creating a curriculum that embodies the values that we have in Queens and being able to take that to different school spaces, different professional spaces, and providing a space for women of color to be empowered by one another. I think that could change a lot of things. That could definitely change the trajectory of my career. So I am looking into pursuing educational background and credentials so that I can support that dream to want to bring that energy to different environments, and hopefully that works.
Absolutely. And it's great that, going back almost a year now when you and I first talked, and you had mentioned this program that you had started at other schools, that you've been able to carry it into UPrep and now see a bigger vision for what it may be. I think that's one of the impacts that the program has had. Jamaal, for yourself, when you're thinking about future next steps, and I know a lot of your work revolves around mentorship, life skills, and early college, what are you thinking about next step-wise?
Honestly, I feel like I could be like an administrator. I feel like I run a school for real. I think that I just see like the culture of like the school that I work in, and I think seeing the adjustments that can be made, seeing what the students are saying, like being able and active and like listening to student voice, that's just how I feel. And I think there should be more mentoring going on with what I can do. But I feel like if I were to say like how many students I mentor, it wouldn't be a number, because every day is a new student that wants to talk. And you can just walk into someone like, why you look like that today? So that even starts to that. My next step, I don't know. I know I've been doing a lot of reading, and I know that I've been interested in a PhD in urban education to learn more about schooling versus education and what that looks like, and learning more like administrative roles and like how programming looks. I think that's another thing that interests me, like what kind of program do we have provided for students after school or during school, what that looks like. So just kind of getting more of the research behind that, and just, I guess, more learning for me.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we talk about as a group often is, well, I wasn't prepared for what I was going to see, or I wasn't ready for what it was actually like. And, putting theory into practice, I think, is so different, because you both have touched on, we have this training and we talk about things, but once you actually get in the school building, does that training and or theory actually translate? And in many cases, it may, but in many cases, it may not, depending upon the context. So what I'd like you both to do and to think about is, if you were advising someone who's considering this program or talking to you about the program, what advice would you give them in order to prepare to be ready to work in this fellowship or to prepare for this program?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I think something I would say to them is, what kind of experiences have you had with students? It's like kind of, I don't know, because it depends on like what kind of high school they came from, what school they came from. I guess, I don't know.
I would say to keep an open mind. There's like we said when we started, maybe we didn't say it, but you don't know what you're going to get on any given day. You don't know what these students go through. You don't know what you're going to go through, and how that's going to affect how you interact with your students. You have to keep an open mind about what you will do with them, because again, there's no one way to teach a student, and you have to be ready to switch what you're going to do. Any given day, I had maybe plans for how Queens would go, and that would shift just because maybe one student wasn't feeling it, or and I would catch the vibe, like people don't feel like reading today, people don't feel like talking today. Okay, let's sit and meditate. Let's sit in silence if that's what it takes. But you have to keep an open mind, because you never know what you're going to get.
I can agree with that. Being open-minded, and I think being creative, because you're going to get hit with things that you've probably never experienced before. You're going to see some things that you'll be like, this is different. And I think with your background, your previous background, that sometimes that stuff might not even be effective yet. You know what I mean? And I think that's even with the trainings that you mentioned about earlier, like we do have trainings on certain things, but we might not be able to use what we learned in training in the summer till March.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And I think that's been happening too, but it's still effective in just being creative in how you could take what you learn and what you observed and make it work with your own like swag.
Mhm.
And like, are you willing to change?
Mhm.
Because
Ooh,
like,
that's good.
my goodness, we as fellows think we just know everything,
mhm.
and we don't need anyone to tell us how to
Mhm.
do our jobs because we're just so good at it and we got hired. But you have to be willing to change,
Mhm.
and not everyone's gonna agree
Mhm.
all the time.
Right.
As fellows, we didn't always agree,
Mhm.
and as people outside of the fellowship didn't always agree with us. So we had to be ready to change our practices and change what we were doing in order to complement and compromise with what's going on in the environment, because we work better together than against anyone. So creating that togetherness required a lot of change and required a lot of us to push past our own personal wants and our own personal gains and look at the bigger picture.
And I think it goes like to the thing we always say, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because
Right.
if you're comfortable, that means you're laxed. And I always had this old head tell me, like, don't get laxed. And I think that's a life thing where if you get laxed, then that's when things start to happen and you're comfortable and you don't want to change, like Brene was saying. And I think that like being able to work in cohesion with the team and knowing that we're all quote unquote experts in what we think we know, and being able to be like, no, that's not right, or this is another way of looking at it, or how can y'all make this work together. I think that's another thing I learned about this year is like working with the team and what that looks like. And people have different styles, different way they talk, different way they operate, and you kind of just gotta, you know what, you're right. I agree. It's just for the, because at the end of the day, all this is for the students and changing their reality of what education should be. Some students don't, aren't fortunate to have the paid education where, public school is a route where this is public education and we have to disrupt any systems of that we can. And that's what this fellowship is brought to do.
Definitely. So what I take from what you all are saying is being in this cohort is a lot like you think of the Justice League or the Avengers. People have their certain strengths. People have their certain roles.
The real world.
And it's a matter of knowing what your role is, seeing how that role fits in with the team in order to best save the world, which is supporting students, right?
Yeah, and there's no what's his name? What's his name?
Thanos?
Nah, Captain. There's no Captain America.
There isn't. There's no one. There's no Captain America. Seriously.
Great. Well, I want to thank you both for providing the time to be able to do this.